A decade ago, Martin Crowe coined the term Fab Four for this incredible bunch of players who all seemed to come through at the exact same time. He believed that all of them would be the number one batter in the world at certain periods and would go on to captain their nations. At that point, Root had the best batting average, which was just above 50. But he was pretty right about, all of them, yeah? But as the Fab Four was sort of taken over more by the fans, when a player struggles, their membership of this fantasy group is suddenly questioned. That happened to Root in 2020, just as he should have been in his peak. People started to ask if he was really at the level of the other three guys at all. And there is no doubt he had slipped from his elevated position a lot. But 4 years later, the question has completely changed. Now it is, can Joe Root climb Sachin Tendulkar's mountainous record? If you love cricket on a deep spiritual level and want to be involved when no matches are being played, we have the game for you. Hit Wicket is so good that Harsha Bhogle and me have backed it. And that's a lot of nerd energy behind one game. This is a strategic game of cricket, and it's not just about whacking your screen really, really hard with your finger. This isn't a game where you swipe all around to try and hit the ball. You work out what works best based on real-life cricket situations. For instance, dot balls bring pressure, ones and twos lead to fours. There is no way you can just hit a six every ball or take wickets all the time. This is proper cricket, yet it still has some special gaming powers in there as well. And so this game is about playing, but also building and managing your team. You are the batter, bowler, owner, coach, captain. It's your dream, right? And there are no ads, it's just cricket. Download Hit Wicket now and bring out the cricket legend in you, because Hit Wicket is a cricket game made for you and supported by other cricket nerds. Stick it in your pocket today. This was made using MV Players Insights. The same technology that supports the England and New Zealand Test players is available to club cricketers as well. Root had a strange start to Test. After playing well as a middle order guy early on, England thought, wait, maybe he can open against Australia. It's an incredible thing that they found this brilliant number 4 and instantly they thought to themselves, oh, let's give him a new cliff face to climb without a Root. The other players in the Fab Four all had pretty solid roles that suited them from early on, outside of Smith's brief cameo down the order. For a long time, Root, Smith and Kohli kept trading places for the number 1 spot. In fact, the gap between him and 4th place, which was Williamson, was less than 1,000 runs. But because of the sheer number of Tests in England play, eventually that was going to change, right? And at the end of 2020, Root was not really that far ahead of the other Fab Four. In 2024, he is more than 2,500 runs up on Smith in 2nd place. The others are currently stuck in a traffic jam, and you can barely see him in the distance at all. But it was not just about the runs. Root had the lowest average among the Fab Four by the end of 2020 as well. And that's now gone up nearly 3 whole runs, which is quite the jump. There's also been an uptick to Williamson's mark. However, Smith and Kohli have started to really struggle, which is kind of what you expect of players of their age. But since the start of 2021, Root has almost 2,000 more runs than the next best batter, which is Usman Khawaja. And amongst batters with at least 8,000, only Jaiswal and Williamson average more. Now, of course, as I said before, it's not really surprising to see him on top of the run-scoring charts because England play so many more Tests than anyone else. But he also maintains a ridiculous average and, of recent times, also an absolutely brilliant strike rate. Thank you, Bazball. Root's purple patch actually starts in Sri Lanka in 2021, where he made 228 and 186 at Galle and followed that up with another double 100 in India. The 186 was just absolutely weird because the rest of England's top 7 scored 104 runs in that innings. At that time, I talked about whether we were seeing peak Joe Root, in part because we'd kind of missed peak Joe Root before then. But clearly that changed him quite a lot. The most prominent difference really has been that he now converts 50s into 100s, which for a batter who is undeniably great is a mystery that it took him so long in his career to work that out. He would score 100 only 26% of the time after he crossed 50 until 2020. Since that, he's more than doubled it to 53%. He made 1700s in his first 97 matches, and then 17 came in less than half of that amount of games. That is just absolutely bizarre. So he's good, we get that. But the question of Tendulkar's record is something else entirely, right? Like at the end of the 2nd Test versus Sri Lanka, Joe Root has 12,377 runs in 145 matches. So he needs another 3,545 runs to overtake the highest run scorer in the history of our game. Now, Root currently has the 4th highest runs per Test of the players with 10,000. Now, a lot can change. If he plays in a better batting lineup, he would only have to bat once more often, and luckily during his career, he's had to bat a little bit more. For some players, you might also get dropped, or at least might be getting eased out of the side. But England struggle to find high-quality test batters for, the longest time, means that it doesn't appear that Root is going to be moved on, so he should stick around, even if he has a bad year or two, or even 3. But it's worth hearing from someone else who's got a lot of runs. He is 33 years of age and 3,000 runs behind, and if his hunger is still there, then there's every chance he could do it. That was Ricky Ponting, the second highest run scorer of all time. So the former Aussie skipper says it depends on hunger, and it does, but there's a lot more to it than that. For Root to break the record, it's not just about desire, he also needs his body to hold up. Regardless of his eagerness, it's about declining fitness, be it his back, his knees, or his eyesight. All of those could be a huge barrier. And as players age, they often move down the order. In fact, Ponting shifted from number 3 to number 4 later in his career. And it's something we don't see as much in the modern era, but if Root does move down the order, that means the lower you bat in the order, the fewer runs you make per test. And because we had Ponting and Tendulkar and Root, who is obviously on a similar path to them as long as he doesn't retire very soon, we wanted to look at the 3 of them. Now, we removed Ponting's runs per innings at the age of 20 because he made a 96 at that stage, and Root had only played 2 innings at the age of 21. But you can see that Root has been pretty consistent from the start of his career until now, outside of a 3-year dip in his late 20s. On the other hand, Ponting was the greatest run scorer in cricket from the age of 28 to 32, and his numbers started going down afterwards. Whereas you can see Tendulkar's career is a lot different than the other two, in that he started as a teenager and obviously played until he was 40. Like Ponting, he had a decline which lasted only a couple of years. However, he managed to recover his batting to a very good level and then enjoyed a brilliant reign around his 36-37. But eventually, like all players, he was timed out. Now, when it comes to Joe Root's weird pattern, a lot of this was him batting at number 3 because England could not buy a top order at that point. Having Alistair Cook as his opener was a huge advantage to him early on, but things got pretty ropey after that point. And clearly Root never wanted the role, and it doesn't really look like it suited his skills, and his overall record would have looked a lot better if they just left him alone. But the argument at the time was that even if Root was batting at number 4, he would have to be in so early, he might as well be 3. But the truth is, no matter how you look at Root as the surprise opener or as the accidental number 3, his run-scoring pattern is nothing like the average top 6 batter with at least 3,000 test runs. Apart from his late 20s, he's usually been much better, or at least as good as everyone else. And he was by no means bad from the age of 27 to 29, it was just that he was ordinary at a time when most batters on this list were absolutely at their prime. And if we look at it in terms of average differential, he's a plus batter in 7 years, slightly below par in 2, and worse in a couple. But batters with 3,000 or more runs usually play most of their innings from ages 27 to 30, and there is generally a steep fall from number of innings played after that. Naturally, the batters who make it to beyond 35 are usually greats or very late bloomers. And Root might actually be the weird combination that is a little bit of both. But age wearies everyone, right? And as Root gets older, he really has to want to keep playing on the days it is harder to get out of bed, or if the bowling feels a little bit faster. Remember that Sachin Tendulkar made his entire life revolve around making runs. Root is just not that kind of person. His friends would say he talks more about golf than batting. So if he struggles, he may just go off and find something else to do. He's got lots of business interests, for instance. Alistair Cook retired at 33, which is Root's current age. We just don't know if Root will be as motivated to score runs if there is a draining Ashes tour or his ankles swell up or there is a new wobble ball era or something. But the one thing that he won't have to worry about is test matches, because there'll be a lot of those. In this FTP, England play 29 more matches, not including any WTC finals. If Root plays all of those matches, he would be at 174 at the age of 36. And knowing England, they could easily slip in a couple of extra series as well. They have never had a cricketer that they wouldn't willingly overwork. The interesting thing about the number that we mentioned before is that after 175 matches, that's when Tendulkar's numbers also start to regress. He also turned 38 a few months after, and his average went down from 57 to 54 in the last 25. So if it can slow down Sachin Tendulkar, it could certainly slow down Joe Root just as much. And the truth is that there are just so many uncertainties when you're looking at a topic like this, because we're looking at the next 5 or 6 years. We don't know if the planet will still be here, let alone Joe Root at the crease. So the question of if he beats Tendulkar is incredibly tough. So let's just make it even harder still. What if we imagine he does do it? Then we're looking at the when. We talked about Tendulkar and Ponting, both players who right at the end of their career struggle a little. But there's a couple of other players that are really interesting. Gordon Greenidge and Jarrod Meandad averages reduced a fair bit. And as we said earlier, Kohli and Smith have also seen huge drops of recent times. They can still correct that, of course. But the point is that Tendulkar and Ponting and Greenidge and Meandad, these are unquestionable great batters. But eventually they did slow down. It is a whole different ballgame to keep making huge runs when your body and athleticism has completely changed. Usually those players are fantastic technicians. And to be honest, Root does have some advantages in the way he plays, like he doesn't have a noticeable weakness against pace or spin. But realistically, of all of his mad skills, the best one is simply getting to the other end. If he keeps doing that into old age, bowlers will have the same issue with him then as they do now. How on earth do you dismiss a bloke who is constantly standing at the non-striker's end? And the other thing in his favour is that he's a fucking Iron Man physically, even if he looks more like a paper boy who has been sunburnt a few too many times. Root has missed hardly any tests in his career so far. Considering he was a 2-format player for a lot of that time, and even 3-format when he started, that's pretty wild. There's also a chance with the ODI World Cup so far ahead and him not being part of the ODI series against Australia this summer that he might actually get a lot more time to focus on red ball. But if we just look at Joe Root, his median runs per innings differential is about 5 runs better than the typical top 6 batter. And if we assume this continues as he gets older, after he turns 34, we estimate that he'll average around 43 runs per innings. And at that rate, he'd need about 83 more innings to surpass Sachin Tendulkar's total runs. Considering that Root usually plays about 1.82 innings per test, that suggests he would break the record in his 200th test match. 200 test matches was exactly the same number that Tendulkar took, which is quite annoying because we did a lot of effort to come to that number and then we could have just guessed that. But to be honest, it's probably a lot tougher to bat to 200 test matches than it is to forecast this, so it's still Root who has the tougher gig, marginally. But as we said at the start, predicting the if or when he breaks Sachin's record is obviously impossible, right? Injury, form and interest are all going to play a part. Because 4 years ago, this wasn't even a real conversation. And so if we look another 4 years into the future, he'll be 37. And it will be less about runs per innings and more about whether he could still walk to the crease without needing a hip replacement. These last 4 years have cemented him as one of the greatest batters of all time. But the next 4 years will tell us just how high he can really go. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.